flying airplanes as the Englander, yeah? And I will get a shotgun and go shooting at him like this, so I will get the gun. And then I will go, oh, I missed him, I'll have another go, here we go. And I'll have another one, here we go, hold the airplane, and oh, I've missed him again. So these really unusual air combats start. People start fighting with each other with shotguns, hunting rifles, pistols, bricks on one occasion, darts, metal darts. They tip out of buckets at each other.
Small comedy anchors.
Yeah, a Frenchman trails an anchor out on a rope to try to bring down the enemy aircraft underneath him. These really unusual combats take place all over the Western Front.
I'm curious though, chap.
Yep.
In 1914,
yep,
how many actual aircraft were shot down?
In 14?
Yes.
In 14.
Yes.
Actual?
Approximate or actual?
Well, give me an approximate.
Well, you had that at the start.
And then,
yeah,
and then you bring it to carry the one.
Yeah, and
we're
then
waiting.
go.
That's none at all. None.
Nobody.
Nobody shoots anybody else down in 1914. No, but it all changes in 1950. It changes with this man here, Roland Garros. Why do we know his name today, ladies and gents? Tennis, absolutely. He's also a racing driver. He sells expensive sports cars. Germans look at the deflector plates and say, that's really simple and a bit crude. Why don't we give it to young Anthony Fokker, a Dutchman who offered his services to us? We took him up because the British turned him down. So he's working for the Germans, and he's a genius. He looks at the deflector plates and says, I can do better. He fits a metal cam to the prop shaft of the engine on his new design, which he calls the Fokker E1, or Eindecker, one deck of wings, one row of wings. The metal cam, the metal gear wheel, goes down through a rod to the machine gun. It slows the cycle of the machine gun, it stops it firing when the blade gets in danger of being hit. It synchronises the machine gun to only fire when the blade won't be struck by the bullets. Now think how fast that blade is moving. That's pretty clever technology for 1915. His view is unencumbered by any spinning propeller. And these pusher aircraft, like the British FE-2B, 2 seats with a gunner at the front. The problem is we've moved the blind spot now behind the aircraft.
That doesn't matter, because look, here I am at the front with my gun, and I can see everything. I can shoot the enemy down easily. This is brilliant.
Now, in reality, on an FE-2B, I, the pilot, would be a bit higher. So here we are, flying along, and I realise there's a Fokker monoplane getting into an attack position on our tail. No radio between me and the pilot, me and the gunner, he stands up, ladies and gentlemen, braces his knees against the outside of the cockpit. He lifts the machine gun off its forward mounting and puts it on a long metal stem so he can cover the top wing and the area above the engine. Of course, I'm taking evasive action. He's fallen out, ladies and gents. Yeah, the gunner's fallen out, and to make matters worse, he's not wearing a parachute. Who built this amazing, smooth, slippery aircraft? It's capable of about 130 miles an hour. 2 machine guns firing through the spinning propeller. They've got a lot of them, and they use them in a different way, and it's deadly. We need something to combat the albatross threat. We come up with the Sopwith Pup. It's all right, but we don't start getting the upper hand until the aircraft behind us is developed. The SE-5A, not the SE-5, that was a bit rubbish, but the SE-5A. This aircraft was developed at Farnborough and just down the road at Boscombe Down, and once it had been accepted by the Flying Corps, it was made in furniture and wood factories all over Britain.
Now don't forget, ladies and gentlemen, of course, women also played an integral part during the Great War. For all the young men who were off fighting, the women went into the factories to work. And it was thanks to these women that these aircraft even came about or were built. They assembled these incredible aircraft, but it wasn't without risk. So the varnish that they used to use is called cellulose dope. And it was called doping when you were applying it to the wings here. And that was hazardous back then, ladies and gentlemen. If that got into your insides, it caused bladder cancer. The women also went to the munitions factory and were known as the munitionettes, but they got a nickname name as the Canaries because their skin would turn yellow because they were dealing with poison they were putting in the shells, the TNT. It wasn't without its risks, ladies and gentlemen, these jobs.
Nor was being a civilian just living in your own home. The Germans are now operating not just against our own air forces in Flanders, they are operating for the first time ever against civilians in London and the home counties. These huge hydrogen-filled airships called Zeppelins, or Schutterlands, it's their manufacturer, they are going over the North Sea and dropping bombs on ordinary people in their beds. They're not very accurate. The first bombing raid on London actually bombed Hull. That's how inaccurate their bombing was. They came at night, they followed railway lines and rivers, but generally they went where the wind took them, even though they had engines. The Zeppelins will be deadly. And the first people to see one, or some of the first people to see one in combat, are in St. Peter's Plain in Lowestoft. Martha Taylor and Samuel Smith find their attention drawn by something in the sky.
Yeah, it's like a big sausage or a cigar flying up high.
How fascinating.
Yeah, very odd. Just a little door opening in it. Hello, funny little man. Oh, things are falling out of it now.
It's getting a little closer.
Yeah, they're falling. Making a funny whistling noise as they come.
Let's just keep watching. It's
yes,
fine.
that's good.
And at that point, the bombs detonated. Martha Taylor and Samuel Smith are the first people in Britain to be killed in an air raid. The house was devastated by the bombs that fell in the street where they were watching the Zeppelin from, about 8:30 in the evening. And the house was stoved in by the explosion. It now carries a blue plaque with their names on it, saying the first deaths ever from an air raid. Now, even though the Zeppelins are pretty rubbish at actually killing lots of people, they terrify people. An aircraft that we have back at home, so they're lighter powered aircraft, they can't climb when the Zeppelins can. If a Zeppelin gets attacked, it simply releases some of its water ballast and the whole thing just climbs almost vertically. Aircraft cannot match that, unless we use the ones we're using in France, aircraft like the SE-5A. So we withdraw aircraft from fighting in France, and trained pilots come back from Flanders to now head up new night fighter squadrons, which means, once again, the Germans get a temporary bounce in the air. So, by the end of the war, young men have fought in the air, have battled in the air, and they have lost their lives in the air. The Germans try hard to develop new designs, but the combination of the Allies, both on land, sea and air, win the day.
One question.
Yes.
Why exactly are we here, and when did these young lads get a chance to actually train?
Well, you can't just go straight from flying straight into war. So here at Stonehenge, there was an airfield, a training airfield.
They weren't flying small aeroplanes like this though here. This was an airfield for bombers, huge great twin-engine Handley Page bombers. These were large aircraft with several crew members in them. And these would have been seen rumbling up and down the grass and flying through the air, training both day and night on this site. Here we've got a map of what Stonehenge airfield looked like 100 years ago. Down the bottom here, that's where the stones are. Up and up the top, that's the visitor centre where we are now. This whole area in the centre was the airfield. These fields just behind us. That's where the aircraft would have been taking off and landing. As you were driving in this morning, you quite possibly came down the A303. Just past the stones, you would have been driving straight through the centre of the field, the air camp. That's where they had huge great hangars, similar size to the visitors centre, which housed the aeroplanes. All of the offices, all of the buildings were down just off the road there. Now today, all of this is gone. You can barely see a trace of it. Because after the war, they decided they wanted to return this landscape to something more in keeping with the stone monument. And that meant that they had to remove the aircraft and all of the buildings. But this is something that would have been seen on this site 100 years